Okay, good evening. I'm Janet Evans, President of the Franklin School Board, and on behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome you to the 2020 annual meeting of the electors. While school boards are charged with the care and control and management of the district, this meeting is for the electors, for you. Tonight, you'll hear our formal budget presentation, and you'll be able to ask questions about the budget and make comments. And you'll be asked to vote on the tax levy. I'd like to begin by introducing my colleagues on the school board. Mrs. Linda Witkowski is the vice president of the board. And Mr. Claude Lewis is board member. Mr. Alan Alexandrovich is our board treasurer. And Mrs. Debbie Larson is the board clerk. And Mr. Mike Sprague is a board member. And Mr. Larry Gamble is a board member. And we also have Dr. Judy Miller, who is our district administrator. And we have Mr. Jim Milzer, our Director of Business Services, Mrs. Valerie Ellihausen, who is our Human Resources Director. And yeah, I'm having a moment. Yeah, because we have a lot of doctors now. So we have Dr. Nick Cohen, who's our Director of Strategic Leadership, and Dr. Chris Reuter, who is our Director of Teacher and Learning, and we have Mrs. Christine Cody, who is our Student Services Director. And so we begin tonight, as we do all our meetings, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'll do that again, in case anyone else is here. So, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I believe you all have packets available, and as we'll move on to agenda item number 3, and we need a motion to appoint a chair for the meeting, which I would be pleased to do. Do we have a motion to appoint a chair?
I nominate Janet Evans as chair.
Okay, we have a motion to appoint myself, Janet Evans, as chairperson for the annual meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Claude Lewis appointed me as, made a second to appoint me as chair. All those in favor of appointing Janet Evans as chair say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. I, at this time, will appoint Mrs. Debbie Larson as the clerk of the school board to serve as our recording secretary for the meeting. For agenda items 4, 5, and 6, Mrs. Larson, the clerk of the school board, would read the official notice of the annual meeting, the legal requirement to hold the annual meeting, and the minutes of the 2019 annual meeting of the electors, published tonight in your handout. However, at this time, I'm looking for a motion to dispense with the reading of the meeting notice and the minutes, and to approve the minutes of the 2019 annual meeting as published in tonight's handout. Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Larry Gamble. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mike Sprague. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. I would now like to call your attention to item 7, the end of the year's treasurer report, which is included in tonight's budget presentation handout. Before we continue with this annual meeting, I would like to call your attention to the rules and the procedures for the 2020 annual meeting. The rules may be found in your handout. Please note that the rules state that any person that wishes to speak at this annual meeting on the budget shall be residents of the Franklin Public School District. Persons who wish to speak shall do so after recognition by the chair and must state their name and address. I would now like to invite Dr. Judy Miller to share the district address.
Good evening. I'm proud to share at this annual meeting the accomplishments of the school district and means by which we will continue to provide a high-quality education for the students of Franklin Public Schools. The 2019-20 school year, although impacted by the onset of COVID-19, was a successful school year. Our coherence plan, designed to help us become a better place to learn, better place to work, and part of a better community, continue to provide the structure for advancing our goals and strategies. During this past year, advancing student achievement focused in 3 areas: equity, SEL, and mind frames, John Hattie's research-based instructional strategies framework. Our entire staff participated in learning about equity. More specifically, all staff members learned about the history of marginalization and their own identities as they relate to the populations of marginalized persons. This work will continue this school year with the development of equity non-negotiables that will be used in decision-making in all areas in which we serve children. The Mind Frames work grounds our instructional practices. It ensures that our staff is using research-based approaches that result in student outcomes. SEL stands for Social Emotional Learning. In this past year, we have built the foundation to do this important work, and now more than ever, the necessary work for our students. Our overall student achievement is heading in the right direction. Due to COVID, we were not able to complete our final assessments, but we were seeing advancements. Our AP pass rate is the highest it's been in 5 years. Our ACT scores are positive, and our MAP trends are indicating growth. We are very proud of our ability to provide mental health support to our students in the form of mental health clinics in our schools. The response from our families was very good and continued during the time in which we were virtual. During this past year, we conducted a community pride survey and learned that 89% of our community agree or strongly agree with the following statement: generally speaking, I am proud of the Franklin Public School District. We continue to work on improving our communications and involvement with the community, and will survey our community again this year to determine how pride in our schools has been affected by the many changes we've experienced. Our overall achievement has been and will continue to be significantly impacted by our new methods for data collection. Our new Qualtrics data has been used many times this year to gather important data and information for decision-making. EDIS is a new software that allows classroom teachers to look at several data points related to individual students to better guide instruction. Both of these programs will continue to be used to enhance the achievement and achieve the goals of our coherence plan. Franklin Public Schools has a long history of good fiscal health. Our bond ratings have been consistently high, saving the district hundreds of thousands of dollars. During this past year, we were able to purchase property west of the ECC for the middle school and recreation expansion. We also purchased 227 acres of land for future schools. This was accomplished without incurring any debt because we've been very good fiscal stewards. This past year, we were able to influence the cost to the district of impact fees. The city will no longer be charging the school district impact fees for new construction. Finally, we have maintained a reasonable levy for our citizens of Franklin for many years and have avoided extreme fluctuations in what taxpayers provide to our schools. School safety is extremely important to me and the professionals I have the privilege of working with, including the Franklin Police and Fire Departments. In the past 3 years, we've made significant improvements in school safety. Nothing else matters if the children and staff are not safe at school. During this past year, we updated our visitor check-in system. The new system's called Raptor and has better safety features. We initiated a student tip line. Our police and fire departments participated with our Franklin High School staff in a threat of violence reunification tabletop exercise. And the Franklin Police Department used Forest Park Middle School for training this summer to simulate what they'd do if an active shooter were in our schools. Finally, we're remodeling the Pleasant View office, so it is similar to all of our other schools in ensuring a safe entry. Today, school safety is important for a whole new set of reasons. We are working on ensuring that we take care of safety related to COVID while not ignoring one single aspect of general safety to protect our school community from the harm of fire, tornado, or an intruder. The 2019-20 school year will always be remembered as the year that COVID-19 changed our lives. On March 13, we made the decision to remove our students from schools and to teach them virtually. We did this successfully to the close of the school year, engaging 97% of our students in active learning. By early June, we were planning for our return, wanting more than anything to have that human contact again with our students. On July 8th, we're ready with our plan and presented it to the Board of Education. Since then, we have worked very hard to respond to what our families want and expect and prepare for the opening of school. We will provide a high-quality educational program for students both in person and virtually. And through it all, we will continue to be good stewards of the taxpayers' investment in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. I am now looking for a motion to recess the annual meeting for the 2020-21 school district and recreation budget hearings. Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Motion by Linda Witkowski. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Debbie Larson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, I will now invite Mr. Jim Milzer to present the school district budget.
There's a lot of information in the document, and there's even more on the website. I won't be going through everything, but I'll start with a discussion of the budget assumptions. Budget assumptions in this draft were developed in April and May, and most of the factors in the budget have had to be estimated even now because it's too early to receive them. We'll get our student counts towards the end of September, and we'll find out the amount of aid we'll receive from the state about halfway through October. Enrollment is a big factor in the budget, the number of students we have, and we had projected enrollment to go up by 10 students. Looking at state aid and the revenue limit, the district's equalized value was 7.92% higher than it was the previous year, which exceeded the state average, which in looking at the equalization aid formula would generally mean that we would be viewed as richer in the state formula and we would lose funds or get less than we would normally would. However, the biennial budget increased funding for the equalization aid by 3.5%, and we also had additional students in our 4K program, which should offset that. In addition, in the state budget, the revenue limit amount was increased by $179 per student, which would bring us an additional $900,000. And special education funding was increased from a 26% reimbursement to 30%, which would mean about $300,000 to the district. Due to the loss of state revenue related to the pandemic, we're hoping that we still have these increases in the budget coming to us as the year goes on. On long-term capital improvement, you heard Dr. Miller talk about the Pleasant View Elementary School office. It takes about 6 months to complete. The cost estimate's about $1.7 million, and again, it's coming out of our long-term capital improvement trust fund. On the benefit area, we went to bid on that, and we ended up switching from Humana to United Healthcare for health Dental and vision, the health and dental insurance rates declined 5.6%, while vision declined 5.9%. Now taking a look at the revenue and where it comes from. Local non-tax revenue represents 7.7% of our revenue, the local tax revenue being 49%, and state and federal aid being 43.3%, as we're planning for it right now. The state and federal aid and the local tax revenue are what make up our revenue limit. So as the state gives us, let's say, additional funds, it results in taxes going down locally. If the state gives us less money, it results in taxes increasing. Looking at expenditures, as one would expect, in teaching children, we have a lot of people involved in that, so salaries and benefits make up 75.3% of our budget. Purchase services, about 18%, and the other category, supplies and so forth, just less than 7%. Taking a look at the estimated tax levy effects, we're projecting that the tax levy, the total tax levy, would go up 1%, which would mean that for a property, for every $100,000 of assessed value of the property, it would go up $10.57. These are tentative estimates because the city doesn't have the assessed value yet. We don't know the number of students. And of course, the state budget was finalized, but we're looking at what the pandemic might do to the state budget, which would then possibly have an effect on us. I have one change on the budget document for the 2021 year. The number listed for the total expenditures for all funds should be $83,330,575. That number was just missing the amount from the special revenue fund, which was new to us this year, in keeping with GASB 84. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Milzer. Now is the time that if there are any electors that would like to take turns to step up to the microphone and state your name and address, if you would like to make any comments on the budget or ask Mr. Milzer any questions on the budget. Do we have any electors that would like to step up to the microphone?
Hello,
Hi.
Mary Karolevich, 8208 West Coventry Drive, Franklin. Yes, I was just curious, I don't think I've ever seen a negative difference for educating children. I just wondered where the $630,967 was going, or where it went.
A negative
Under the
difference.
estimated total tax levy?
Oh, okay. Yes, the tax levy under educating children, we're projecting to go down by $630,000. And it's offset by long-term debt where the levy goes up $970,000 for a total increase of $339,000.
Okay. And I, just curious, I don't know how this would come out budget-wise, but because of the available funds that some businesses were allowed under the pandemic, was the district, I don't know how many employees the district has, but I heard something on the radio the other day that employers with 500 employees or less could have applied for grant monies, and I wondered if the district, if it qualified, if it did apply, and if it were to use those funds for PPEs, or what any types of funds would be used, or did we get any money from the state to use for PPEs?
Yeah, the funding is a little different for school districts. It's based on Title I amounts that districts received. So we're projected to receive about $282,000 from that for funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Angela Beer, 9025 South Deerbrook Court. Sort of piggybacking on what she asked, I'm just curious. So I saw that in the budget detail, the average cost spent per student also went down. And so that probably contributed to that $630,000 and change decrease. And we are projected to have 10 more students next year. So could you kind of talk me through how that worked?
Right. In looking at the number of students we have, we're also looking at summer school going down considerably. So because we couldn't have
Okay.
students around here, we thought that it would go down quite a bit, which it did. So that made
So
a change
that's
right
basically
there.
a gain from not having to educate over the summer?
Right, we wouldn't have the summer school students go right into the count for how many students we have. So if we have fewer students, then overall, we have a lower number of students there, and that would affect it.
Would that affect the cost, the dollar amount spent per student as well?
Right. Right, because it would affect the number of students.
But I would think that your numerator would still be, like your denominator went down, but your numerator would go down as well. So you still end up with a smaller amount spent per student. Is that correct?
I guess I'd have to look at it. I don't have it in front of me.
Oh, okay.
But
That,
I'd be
yeah, that was
happy
in
to-
the
I'd-
overall budget document.
Yeah, I'd be happy to catch up with you on that one.
Okay. I have some questions about, I was just interested to read about the fund balance. I'm just curious how districts, and apparently our district 20 years ago, managed things if they didn't have an adequate fund balance to handle a lag between income and expenses. Could you, in 30 seconds or no, as long as it takes, explain that to me?
Yeah, when I started here, our fund balance was negative $15,000. We were essentially broke. And at that point, a district has to borrow money on a short-term basis because July 1, we start incurring expenses and we get very little money through even December. So at the highest point, I believe we were borrowing about $8 million a year. And I don't remember the number, but I have a number in the draft 1 presentation packet of what it would be today if we didn't have the fund balance we have. That's what carries us through and pays all of our bills until our tax levy starts coming in.
And so in addition to just being a really tenuous circumstance from which to operate, that affects our bond rating, is that
Yes.
accurate? And then, was some of that fund balance money what was used to purchase those plots of land without having to go to referendum?
Yes, yes. Fund balance then is transferred to our long-term investment fund
Okay.
for land purchases, for all those kinds of things.
And how do you determine what your goal fund balance is from year to year in setting the budget?
We want to make sure that we have enough to operate that we never have to borrow again, and that we have a cushion in case something goes wrong. If we have major problems with HVAC systems, the pool, large items like that, it can add up in a hurry, and we want to be able to cover that. Also, if our expenditures don't line up exactly like they did maybe in the past, and they're a little heavier on the front end, we want to be able to cover
So it's basically looking at historical trends and then a percentage on top for
historical
unexpected.
trends, and then knowledge of the future and being prepared.
You have knowledge of the future?
I do.
Oh, that's why you're so good at your job, Mr. Mills. I was just curious, looking through the budget detail on page 31, there was a significant decrease under medical purchase services. This isn't from the annual meeting document. I'm sorry, I went back and looked at the percent. I'm just curious, anytime there's a significant change from one year to the next, I wonder how you pulled that off. And in this particular year, I want to say it was like $30,000 less. What did we stop buying? And then where is all of the additional purchased? I guess it would be goods as opposed to services. You're not hiring any additional medical staff, per se.
Yeah, again, I would have to take a look at that. Things have changed considerably.
Where can we find in
from
the
what was
overall
in-
budget, like line
envisioned.
item-wise, like where additional purchases related to COVID expenses are in terms of specifically medical supplies, thermometers and PPE?
It would be in the first section. It wouldn't be called out that
It
you would
wouldn't,
see
okay.
it,
It's sort of,
but it would be in the first section of the budget. Let's see here.
so it's
under-
not a specific line item?
No, it's
Okay.
under instruction, most of it, and
Okay.
then some of it would also be in support.
How do you feel about our current position to be able to adequately gown, glove, and thermometerize our staff?
I feel very good about it. We have, we really have the supplies that we need
Excellent.
at this point. We've been
Alright.
able to get all of them and staff ourselves appropriately.
Thermometerize is an official medical term. Just note that for.
Excellent.
And then one last question. I'm just curious, I'm interested to hear about all the training that the staff is receiving. Is that going to be continued into perpetuity so that as new staff come on, they're receiving the same training? Corollary, is there what's the relative cost of professional development for a new staff hire in the first year versus retaining staff? So this is a question going to the value of retention versus hiring. It's kind of a big question. I don't know if you can answer it right off
Definitely
the
don't
bat.
have like that number in
Yeah.
front of me right now. We'd have to provide you that at some other point in terms of what the professional development costs would be. With regard to training our staff, absolutely. We have a really strong mentor-mentee program in the district to ensure that all new staff have the information they need to be successful and safe.
So for example, the equity training that's been going on really intensely for the past year and going into the next year, is it sort of like if you don't happen to be here during these 2 years, you miss the boat?
Nope, absolutely not. We would not be successful if those individuals did not go through the same learning as everyone else.
Great, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you. Are there any other electors? Okay.
Hello, Tamara Grubschmidt, 8320 River Terrace Drive. Piggybacking a little bit on the preparation for this coming school year. In terms of technology, I looked at the technology part of the budget. It didn't address things like possibly having cameras within classrooms for students who have to be excluded because they were within 6 feet for 15 minutes of another student who may have tested positive. What types of technology are we putting in place so that the students who are in that situation can still continue with learning, or is it like they're just looking at the learning management system and having to figure it out on their own? I know my daughter goes through a great deal of stress when she's out for 2 days. I can't imagine what it might feel like for 10 days. I understand there would be no good reason for me to push her back in. That's not what I'm arguing. I just want to see that the supports are available in terms of technology for those students.
Dr. Reuter, could you?
Yeah, so we made a conscious effort not to camerize every classroom, as that's not an optimal way to learn with having a mounted camera, and that takes away from the people present. So we'll be utilizing our learning management systems and developing synchronous times for, let's say your daughter is out for 10 days. Content and expectations will be built in that learning management system, but then the teachers, some of the expectations will be built around how do we build office hours to work and meet with kids that are at home while the teacher and maybe the majority of the class are still at school. So when we know that we have a student or a population of students that will be at home learning and we haven't shut down an entire school, then we'll work with that said classroom or grade level, whatever it might be, and develop a plan for those students at home that's specific to where they're on the continuum of learning, as well as continue to instruct at high levels within the classroom.
I'd like to suggest just simply, I've been recording my own courses, and I think that people are understanding that it's a way to make an accommodation for a person who would be able to have instruction at a different time. And so if a student is not able to participate in that interaction, that it would be available later for them.
And there are other methods we're going about with not just having a camera on a teacher lecturing, because we know that's not a high leverage instructional practice that's going to result in the academic success that we want to see. So we have a number of programs that will be able to have the teacher record themselves, maybe teaching a shorter version, condensed version of the lesson, as well as you think about the high school level. AP has released a suite of information, as well as some of the other programs we utilize in math and literacy that we can utilize to push out that maybe others are teaching, the developers of the curriculum, and then we build the repository of those lessons for students, but then we still have that human interaction via Google Meet or whatever it might be to connect and provide the feedback, which is essential to the progression of your daughter moving along a continuum of a curriculum.
Okay.
And we'll learn as we go, just like everyone else has, right?
understand.
And so we've thought of as many scenarios as possible. One kid's gone from the class to an entire shutdown. We have plans for all of that, and until we get kids back in school and we see what this is like, then we'll work with our teachers to see what the management piece is, as well as keeping those high expectations.
Okay. Is there actually a state statute that says that we can't record students, or is this a preference of the school district? I haven't found anything within board policies, but I know in terms of, let's see, like a field trip, parents do have to sign a release for photography or videoing. But I
So-
haven't found, I
Yeah.
haven't seen anything that was,
There are a number of meetings I go to regarding this topic, and there are some legal concerns with regard to confidentiality of children. And if you have a classroom and someone from outside is viewing that classroom and the actions of the students and the teacher, there could be issues with FERPA. So, it is an area of concern, and I continue to learn more about legally what those issues are with confidentiality of what goes on in a classroom, a student with a disability or any other student and their interactions being viewed by the public live is a concern.
I don't think that, a student's classroom would be something that would be live and to the public, though. It would be simply shared with the student through their email, and they would join in just through a link that would only be for them, correct?
I'm not sure what the vision is, but I think, we'd be happy to talk with you about that. But in terms of the budget, we are, purchasing the technology we need to have our teachers teach virtually with the families who've chosen that. And then to supply our teachers in the classroom who will have students periodically out
Okay,
with the support they need as well virtually.
okay. And what, in terms of professional development, in terms of the budget, has been done to help those teachers pivot?
I'm going to defer to Dr.
Yeah, so
Reuter
we
again.
have pre-session starts next week, teachers report. We have, I believe, 79 teachers that in some aspect of their workload for the day, they're teaching in a virtual environment, whether that's fully virtual or a section of a given course at the high school. So we'll be, during the summer, time was set aside, or every teacher was expected to develop their Google Classroom and the management system around some expectations we put in place with support from our instructional technology assistants and our district technology coordinator. And then moving into next week, any teacher that is teaching, like I said, any aspect of virtual, whether it's fully virtual or let's say just a section of IM2 at the high school, they'll go through some training, and then we'll progress as we work throughout the year to gather feedback of the areas that might be differentiated per level and what teachers need. We'll utilize professional development days and any other means that we need to make sure that not only the in-person experience is optimal, but the virtual experiences as well.
And then how many days are designated for professional development days
believe
this year?
we-
Is it any extra?
We have 5 in calendared and throughout the year, and we have 3 next week.
Okay. Are there any extra that weren't budgeted for in the previous year?
We do not have any extra on the calendar at this time,
Okay, okay,
because every time we would take a day off, that's one less student contact day.
understood, okay. In going along the same lines, we talked about the MAP test and the Aspire test, other tests. Are any of these allowed to be purchased so that students can take them virtually? And is that cost different than in a face-to-face environment?
I'll have you pivot to
Yep.
Dr.
There you
Cohn
go.
to
How
take
you
that
doing?
one. That is the new word
Thank
this
you.
year.
Yeah, so luckily our district assessment vendors realize that they have to be adaptive, right? And there's a variety of conditions in which they need to provide those assessments. So we'll be administering both the MAP assessment and the ACT Aspire interim, both at home to students who are part of the virtual program, as well as students who are face-to-face with us. So all students will have equal access to those assessments this year.
Okay, so we will have a scorecard that results in something that gives us data. I know this past year we didn't have the spring.
Yeah, so there's a difference between the state assessments and the district assessments that we choose to administer, right? So MAP, ACT Aspire interim, some of those assessments we administer, so we have more control over those, right? So those we'll be able to administer. We are planning to move forward with those both in person and at home. The state assessments, the state has told us that they're planning to move forward with the state assessments this year. They're also planning to move forward with the issuance of a state report card a year from now. There won't be one this year for this past school year, but in a year, there likely will be. We have a little less flexibility with those state assessments, so things like the Forward exam and the ACT and the ACT Aspire Summative. We'll work with our parents to figure out if a student is at home, how we're going to try to administer those, but we don't have the flexibility to at home administer those summative assessments, yet we still need to assess our students. So we'll need to likely provide a testing location, and students will likely have to come in and assess.
Okay, sounds good. Is there any difference in cost doing it one way or another, paying for proctors?
No, those pieces are all within the cost of what we've already paid, so they're part of existing contracts.
Okay, great. Then, in terms of the projection of 10 more, the amount of money that is paid to other districts, have we lost students because of our present model of instruction that have chosen to go outside the district? And what amount are we going to be paying to other districts of students who are not signing up for Franklin Public Schools next year?
I don't have a final number on that. Initially, there were students that applied to other districts before we came out with our virtual program, and then many of those students came back to be here for the virtual program. So I don't have a final number on it. The differential between what we receive in funds and what we pay to districts for students going out is quite large. We would not have to, we would not lose money on it, let's say that way. But the number will be smaller than it was originally.
Okay. In terms of the transportation budget, I saw it's 3.8%. Was that decreased because of people having the survey that came out, is it June? I'm not sure which month that was in, June or July? Was that decreased because of that, or has it stayed the same?
No, we didn't decrease it because of the response to the survey. Because we need to socially distance students on the bus, we wanted to maintain all of the routes that we had in the past, although last year we were short of routes that we wanted because they couldn't find drivers.
I understand that,
And
yeah.
I'm sure they'll have that problem again, but we wanted to have at least as many routes as we had last year.
I would say also that because the survey was coupled along with the same questions of going virtual or not, many of us did not receive the question if we were interested in taking a bus. If we selected that we wanted to have a virtual option, the third question wasn't present to us. So you may find that there are many parents who are choosing not to send their child on a bus. And that could, I understand the idea, we still need to do social distancing, so we have the same number of routes, but we may find a lot less ridership. So, okay. Let's see. If I come up with another question, I'll return. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any other electors who would like to make a comment or ask a question? Anyone else? Okay.
In the budget, it talks about 5 retirees, and I don't know if it means retirees that are retiring the end of the last academic year or the coming. Is that
End of the last academic year.
the last? And how many teachers have chosen not to return for other reasons?
Do you mean resignations?
I would assume it would be resignations or because of this climate, that they're feeling comfortable coming back face to face.
I'm not going to be able to give you an exact number. I can tell you that they're on the teaching staff side, one, outside of any ADA accommodation that might have been made appropriately under the disability law.
Okay.
The majority of our staff are returning. Our turnover rate is much lower this year than it has been in prior years, in terms of just general resignations that you would normally see me present on when I do the turnover report.
And so the new hires are because of?
Many are enrollment changes, and then what is our traditional resignation. But there are certainly new positions in the number of fills that we have as well.
Will that result in smaller class sizes, or is it Are we looking to do that because of this environment and the social emotional learning and the better connection to students that we're looking for in this coming year?
Yes, I mean, we certainly have that as a consideration in the way we address classes in the buildings, along with what their square footage is, whether they have the ability in a building now to socially distance classes. And so we're finalizing all of our numbers in terms of the in-person sections and the virtual sections in each building. But they are certainly within reasonable class sizes. We've taken that into consideration, particularly at the lower primary, elementary levels.
Okay, and are we going to be outsourcing some of the virtual to instructors that are outside of the district? that are
Not at this
currently-
time.
Okay, I know in the summer school, that was the experience that we had, that we did have an outside of the district teacher for gym.
For physical
For
education,
physical
yes.
education.
Correct.
Okay.
Not at this time.
So not at this time for anyone else?
No,
Okay.
as Dr. Reuter referenced, the
Okay.
80 are in-house to Franklin.
Okay, thank
And
you.
the summer school was outsourced because we could not fill internally with any teachers on our staff to run a summer school FIAD course.
Okay. I'd love to give you feedback on that,
Sure.
but that's not budgetary.
That's another, call me.
That is, okay, will do.
Thank you. I'll make a final call then for any other comment or question on the budget. Anyone else? All right. Then I'll close the hearing on the budget. And I'll move on to item 11, and I will remind any of the electors that if you would like to make a motion or a second, that you must state your name and address. So for item 11, I am now looking for a motion to approve the 2020-21 school tax levy for operations in the amount of $28,686,277. Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Motion by Debbie Larson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Larry Gamble. All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone not in favor of that motion? Motion carries. And now, do I hear a motion to approve the 2020-21 school tax levy for debt service in the amount of $5,741,306? Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mike Sprague. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alan Alexandrovich. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve the 2020-21 Community Education Recreation Tax Levy in the amount of $626,276?
So moved. Second.
Okay, I think that was Mr. Alexandrovich, and second by Mrs. Linda Witkowski. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. For item 12, the electors at last year's annual meeting approved school board salaries in the amount of $4,000 annually per board member. I am looking for a motion to approve school board salaries for the 2020-21 school year, and the motion should state the amount per school board member annually. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
No, you can, but you must state an amount annually.
Oh, $4,000 annually.
A motion by Debbie Larson of $4,000 annually per board member. Does anyone have a second?
Second.
Second by Mary Karalevich. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. For item 13, Do I have a motion to schedule the 2021 annual meeting of the electors on Wednesday, August 18th, 2021, at 6 o'clock PM at the Education and Community Center? Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Larry Gamble. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Linda Witkowski. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 14, do I have a motion to adjourn the 2020 annual meeting of the electors of the Franklin Public School District?
So moved.
Motion by Linda Witkowski, and there was a second by Mike Sprague. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at 6:48 PM.